Hey, it's Lukky. Godot 4.4 has been released, and there's a bunch of quality of life improvements I would like to take a look at. There are also a bunch of new big features added, but for now we're just going to take a look at the workflows that have been optimized in Godot 4.4. If you want to see all the features updated and added in Godot 4.4, be sure to check out the release page. All the interactive videos and demo videos make it a super fun read. Alright, let's get into it. So, I have this super simple demo scene here. I have a first person controller, a little archway, and some physics objects are gonna drop down in the scene. And the first feature I would like to take a look at is the in-game debugger. You probably already knew that in Godot we had the remote view here in your scene, where you can inspect all your nodes and your whole scene hierarchy. It can be really hard to find a specific object and really make sense of all this data without having a visual aid. And right now we have it here. So if you run your game, you get this little toolbar, and let's pause it for now. And this feature basically allows you to step into your game in real time and debug or inspect any property or any node. So at the top you have your pause and your step button. This allows you to step through your game frame by frame. Then next to that you have your input. So right now I'm just using the input of the game so I can control my player. And next to that you can select 2D, which allows you to select 2D nodes in the scene, or 3D, which allows you to select 3D nodes in your scene, which is super useful. Now, if you really want to step into your game and inspect stuff just like you could in the editor, you want to use the camera button right here. And this allows you to step out of your player and move into the scene. And then you can select any node, check all their values and properties, and really easily debug your game. This of course was already a feature in Unity, and a lot of people have been waiting for it to make its way to Godot, and now it's finally here, so we're very happy about that. I'll just like to run through this toolbar so you know what everything does. This little eye icon just hides the current selection, in case you want to actually see what your game looks like without the selection window. Then here you have your selection options. These are the same as here in the editor. So the just arrow selects the first node you click on, and the little drop down window allows you to select anything that your mouse is currently over. Then next to that is that camera button, which allows you to go into this freeform camera, where you can look at your whole scene, not just from your player perspective, and really get in there. Then the options for the camera allows you to reset your camera to the player point, and it allows you to manipulate the camera in-game, so manipulate it here, or manipulate it in editor. That means if you go back into your editor and you look at something in the editor, it updates in your game view. Very useful. The next three options are for your aspect ratio. So right now it resizes with the game workspace, or you can keep your aspect ratio in case you're only developing for specific aspect ratios, or you can keep that launch resolution, which is set in the project settings window. So then you always use this resolution if you're working with a specific resolution. Then the next thing that has been added, which is also super useful, is right here. This allows you to use this game window on play. So if you disable this and you run your game, you can see that little top bar is gone. This is how it used to be. It can be very useful if you just want a clean game view. And then this second option, if you enable it again, the second option makes the game window floating. So if you disable this and you run your game, now your game runs within the editor, just like Unity. So what this also allows us to do is to manipulate objects in real time in-game. So if we run the game again, we go into our 3D select and we'll get that free floating camera. Then go over to these physics objects and we'll pause it right here. Let's select this cube. And then if we go into its physics object, you can see all its properties, including its velocity. So for example, we could just set its velocity to 10 upwards. And now if we unpause the game, you can see that cube shoots up. Super useful for debugging AI. If you want to see what an AI is thinking or custom properties you set, it's very easy to just jump into your game, find your object, and see what's going on under the hood. Really, really amazing feature. The next feature I'd like to take a look at is the implementation of Jolt physics in Godot. Jolt Physics was already a very popular physics solver for Godot, but right now it's included in the box. So if you go into your project settings, into Physics 3D, you'll now see in this dropdown Jolt Physics. I myself have never found a reason not to use Jolt Physics yet. It's just a way better solver. It's a little bit heavier on the computation, I believe, but I might be wrong on that. And what has also been added is physics interpolation for 3D physics. We already had this for 2D physics, but now also for 3D. What this means is that you can run your physics simulation at a lower FPS and the simulation will still look smooth. So let me give you an example of that. Right now it's running at 60 frames per second, so there's no real need for interpolation. But let's say you're on targeting lower hardware, for example mobile devices, you might turn this down to 15 frames per second just to get a little bit more processing power. And now if you run this, you can see all the physics is looking very janky. And my player controller is also a physics body, so it's also quite slow. But you can see my looking around is still smooth, because that's just on the normal update. But now, in the new update, we can interpolate those physics steps by going into physics common physics interpolation and enabling that. And this will generate in between frames between those physics steps, making your simulation smooth while cutting down on performance cost. And you can see everything is running smooth now. You can see the interpolation sometimes gets it wrong. When something is falling off the edge, you can see they're moving a little bit into geometry. So it is a nice optimization, but probably not super useful for physics-dependent games. But yeah, it is a super nice optimization, and cutting it down to 15 is a bit harsh. You would probably go down to 30 or 40. And now if you run it, simulation will be almost perfect, but you will save a lot of processing power. So that's really cool to see. The next one is a very small one, but I've been waiting for this feature for so long. It's the previewing of camera views. Before you had to select a camera, go into this preview window, and then you could see what your camera is seeing. But right now we have right here in the inspector a live preview of what the camera sees. This is especially useful for first-person games, which I make a lot, where you're constantly switching back and forth between the first-person view and the world view to position your view models or your guns, or just to see how it's looking from the first-person perspective, because the perspective is so different from a first-person view than a world view. Now, if you really want to do first-person animations or go into detailed tweaking, we of course still have the split view right here on the top. You can go into two viewports and just lock one to the camera view. This is still very useful because, of course, when you click off your camera, you lose that preview window. You can still use this. But yeah, it's a super nice feature to finally see in Godot, especially when working with multiple cameras. Very nice quality of life update. And the last quality of life feature that I'd like to take a look at is picking and placing 3D scenes. So Godot 4.4 added the physics-based placing of objects. So now if I place this ball, for example, in the scene, you can see it sticks to the walls and sticks to the floors. This was already possible in earlier Godot versions, but it was a paid asset. And right now seeing it natively in the engine is just so nice. You can way easier populate a scene. But this whole workflow has actually been improved, because if I make this local real quick, before when you saved an object in your scene as a branch, you would have to reset its position in its own scene, and this was so frustrating to me, and I'm so glad that they finally took it out. But before it was always like this, so if I save this as box 2, and then I go into that scene, you can see it keeps its transform in the parent scene, which is absolutely useless. I mean, maybe there's some weird use case for it, but I've always found it super annoying that you have to go into the scene again and then reposition this to 0, and then you could go back in your main scene, and then you could go place it in. But now, if I make this local again, and I save this as its own branch, you can see these options have been added, which allows you to reset its position, reset the rotation, and reset the scale. And now when I save this as ball 3, and we go into that scene, you can see it's perfectly at the center, right where you want it. And this just allows you to grab it again and drag it back in, and it's at the perfect position. This whole workflow just makes populating 3D scenes, especially big 3D scenes, so much faster. Environments will be so much nicer to do. And if we actually combine this with a feature that has been added in 4.3, which is, if we move this to the bottom, you can see it takes a different shape with like the little preview windows. And then we make this floating. You can have this as your little color palette over your scene, and you can just Bob Ross it, take from your palette, move everything into your scene. Super, super nice. Very fast and easy to populate your 3D scenes. So those are my 4 favorite quality of life improvements in Godot 4.4. I'm going to be playing around with the update a lot more, especially with the new look at function in skeletal animations, which is finally a nice alternative to inverse kinematics, which is going to be awesome. If you're wondering about the theme I'm using in Godot, it's going to be the first link in the description, and the release page for the 4.4 updates will be the second one. And thanks to all the contributors who made another amazing Godot update, and thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.